In this lesson, we're going to cover the basic configuration of port channels on Arista switches. I like to follow a general order of operation when configuring my port channels. I first configure the physical interfaces and the appropriate attributes, and then join them to the port channel interface where I'll add any final touches. On our lab switches, we'll first configure two physical interfaces on both sides and have them assigned to join a port channel specific to layer 2. Then we'll jump into the actual port channel configuration to add any other elements that belong to the port channel and those underlying physical interfaces. In my lab, I have switch 1 and switch 2 connected via two physical interfaces, which are Ethernet 1 and Ethernet 2. I've already configured switch 2 so that when we get done configuring switch 1, we can see our port channel as up. So on switch 1, we'll go into config mode by typing config and then enter. And here you could do each physical interface individually, or you could do them at the same time. So in this example, I'll configure them at the same time. It's much like a range option. So interface eth1 and then -2, enter. Description, and I'm going to put in PO10 to switch 2, enter. Now I'm going to put it in switch port trunk mode. So I'm going to do switch port, enter, switch port mode trunk, enter, and then join both these physical interfaces to the channel group or port channel. So we'll type channel dash group 10 space mode, and then you can question mark it where you see our active, on, and passive. So we're going to set both of these to active and hit enter. We can use the show run interface Ethernet 1 and show run interface Ethernet 2 for our verification. So let's do that here. Show run interface Ethernet 1, enter. And we see our description, switch port mode trunk, and channel group 10 mode active. And let's do the same for Ethernet 2. Show run interface Ethernet 2, enter. And our running configuration of Ethernet 2 is the description, switch port mode trunk, and then our channel group 10 mode active. So we could also look at our port channel 10, show run interface port channel 10, enter. And we can see it's just simply switch port mode trunk. We can also issue the command show interface port channel 10 and enter. We can see our MTU is jumbo at 9214 bytes, and our bandwidth is 20 gig, and that we have two active members in the port channel, and those interfaces are Ethernet 1 and Ethernet 2. We can also add some other additional configuration to the port channel. So we could type interface port channel 10, and here we could do something like add a description. So we could do description layer 2 to switch 2, enter. We could question mark it here, and you can see that there are very similar options to the ones you would expect to see on physical interfaces. If we expand our options after IP, or in other words, type IP space question mark, we can see that if we were to run this interface as a no switch port and put it into layer 3 mode, then we can play with options associated with things like OSPF, multicast, PIM, and several others. Let's create a new port channel that we use in layer 3 mode, rather than this layer 2 mode example. On both switch 1 and switch 2, I have two other physical connections via interfaces 11 and 12 on each. So if we get out of configuration mode on switch 1, we can enter the command show LLDP neighbors and hit enter. And you can see that beyond just Ethernet 1 and 2, we also have Ethernet 11 and 12 physically connected between our lab switch 1 and our lab switch 2. Let's set Ethernet 11 and 12 on both switches to be layer 3 interfaces, where we'll place the layer 3 address on a new port channel, which will be port channel 11. So here we'll type config, enter, interface, and let's do Ethernet 11-12, enter. And then we'll do description, layer 3 to switch to, enter. No switch port, enter. And the no switch port option is what we use to make it a layer 3 interface. And then we're going to join both of these to a new channel group, channel-group 11 space mode space active, enter. And then now we configure our port channel 11, interface port channel 11, enter. Again, let's put a description, layer 3 to switch 2, enter. And then here we'll add an IP address. IP address 172.16.11.5/30, enter. We'll verify that configuration with the show run interface port channel 11. And there we can see our description, the fact that we're running no switch port, which makes it a layer 3 interface. And since we're doing that, we can apply an IP address to that port channel. So now let's go configure switch 2. So we'll end out of this, exit, I'll SSH over to my other switch, switch 2, and repeat those steps. So config, enter, interface, Ethernet, I'm going to do 11-12, enter, description, layer 3 to, and this time it's switch 1, enter, no switch port, enter, and then channel dash group 11 mode active, enter. And then we get into our interface port channel 11, enter, description, layer 3 to switch 1, enter. And then we can apply our IP address, IP address 172.16.11.6/30, enter. And then again, with our verification, we always want to verify. So we'll do a show run interface port channel 11, enter. And we can see our description that it's no switch port, so we're running in layer 3 mode, and then we've applied a layer 3 IP address, the 172.16.11.6. So we should be able to ping back and forth on this layer 3 port channel. So from here, we'll ping 172.16.11.5, which is switch 1's port channel 11 IP address. If we hit enter, we see we get a response pretty quickly. And just for verification purposes, let's exit off of switch 2, go back to switch 1, and do the same thing. So let's do our show run interface port channel 11, enter. And then let's verify our layer 3 reachability. Ping 172.16.11.6 for the IP address of port channel 11 on switch 2. Hit enter, and there we get our responses to ping. If we issue the command show interface port channel 11, enter, we can see in our output we have an IP address. We see that our bandwidth is 20 gig. Notice here the difference though, as a layer 3 interface, our MTU by default is 1500 bytes. And then also notice, just as before with the layer 2 interface, we can see specifically which 2 active members are part of this port channel 11. That wraps up our port channel configurations for both layer 2 and layer 3. And it concludes this session about basic configuration of port channels on Arista switches. For more information on port channels, be sure to see Arista's configuration guide.